A few weeks ago, I was sitting in a room while a CEO rehearsed a keynote. Big moment in the company. They had just done something that put the whole business on a much bigger stage, a global one. And the next day, he would stand in front of about 300 people to market. Now, he knew the material cold. He knew the business better than anyone in the building, and he had a genuinely good story to tell. And then I heard his opening. Hello, I'm so excited to be here. How's everyone doing? No, please, no. Now, he wasn't my client, for the record. He was a friend of a friend, and I just happened to be in the room, which matters here because I apparently have real trouble minding my own business. But I kept listening. A few minutes in, he told this fantastic story. Years back, he'd taken the idea to an investor, and the investor laughed at him. Laughed. Now think about where that lands. Here's a guy about to walk on stage and celebrate a massive win. And the story of somebody laughing in his face when he said he would build it is parked halfway down the deck on slide 6, waiting ever so politely for its turn. That is the opening. That's the whole thing, sitting right there on slide 6. I told him so. Take the investor story, move it to the front, and start cold. An investor laughed at me when I told him what we were going to build. Say that, and I want to know what happens next. I'm already leaning in. Well, presentation day comes. He walks onto that stage, 300 people waiting, and here's what he opens with. Hello, I'm so excited to be here. How's everyone doing? He went with the safe bet. Now, nothing blew up. He didn't stumble. He didn't lose his place. He definitely did not embarrass himself. The opening just dissolved. It melted into every other opening we've all heard 100 times. And by the time that the room heard that sentence, they had settled in for ordinary. Yawn. That's the thing that's been rattling around in my head ever since. Why do capable people with something interesting to say go generic the second the microphone comes on? That is what we're working on today in this podcast episode. This is the Presence Lab. I'm Dale Dixon. Today, we're getting underneath those first few seconds. What's actually happening in your body and in the room? Why pressure quietly swaps your best material for your safest, and how to build an opening that's still there for you when the stakes are high and the nerves are real. I built a field guide for this one too, so you can do the work before your next talk. There's going to be more on that in just a moment. First, I owe you the reason this particular problem has bugged me for most of my life. You see, I got my first radio job at 17. One of the first things they taught me was how to write a news story. And the very first sentence had one job: grab the listener and give them a reason to care about the next sentence. And that got pounded into me early. So a few years later, in college, I ran the teleprompter at a television station. This was the old system. Now I'm so dating myself. This was long before the smooth digital ones. There was an actual conveyor belt. Paper script rode along the belt. A camera was pointed straight down at it, and the words got sent up to the glass in front of the lens so the anchor could look into the camera and read. My job was to roll that belt at exactly the speed that the anchor was speaking. And hour after hour, story after story, I read those opening lines right along with them. One lead, then the next lead, then another one after that. Every first sentence asking the same quiet question. Why should anybody keep listening? Now, you do that for close to 40 years, and you start to hear an opening. Sometimes it shows up while I'm still building the talk. Sometimes I find it literally in the minutes before I go on stage because somebody says something backstage or the room shifts a little bit and I suddenly know exactly where to start. Careful here, though. That is not my advice to you. Leaving your opening until the minutes before you speak is a terrible plan if you haven't spent 4 decades wiring that one reflex. What looks spontaneous after 10,000 reps is a trained instinct. It is not a gamble. And that's exactly why the CEO story gets me. He had a hook. He had the interesting story. The good material was right there. The moment he had to cross onto that stage, he reached for the safest words in the building. I'm excited to be here. Most presentation training treats this as a writing problem. Write a sharp hook. Ask a bold question. Open with a shocking number. Tell a story. Honestly, that advice is often fine. I've handed people some of it myself. And in Sweating Bullets, I wrote about opening with a current, relevant story and skipping the long runway of pleasantries. Here's where it breaks down. The real problem shows up one step earlier. We can write a great opening and still fail to use it. We can have the perfect story sitting on slide 6 and walk on stage sounding exactly like the 3 people who spoke before us. The words on the page were never the hard part. Reaching them under pressure is. So this shows up way past the keynote. It's the board update that opens with "Thanks everyone for making time." It's the town hall. It's the big client pitch, the all hands, the first 90 seconds of a job interview. Anywhere where the stakes climb, the same swap happens. Your most interesting self gets quietly traded for your safest self right at the top. So what makes reaching that good material so hard? I'll tell you, it's state. It's what's happening in between our ears. Here's what the research says, and then I'm going to get us out of the weeds. Start with your body. Researchers have mapped how a speaker's nerves move across a talk, and the pattern isn't what most of us assume. The worry tends to peak just before we start in the waiting. The physical surge, the heart rate, and the whole system flooring it peaks the moment you actually begin to speak. Read that again. We treat the opening like the warm-up lap. Your body treats it like the steepest part of the climb. At the same time, the room is already reading you. People form impressions astonishingly fast off of tiny scraps of behavior before you've said much of anything. That's not a life sentence. People update as they go, thank goodness. It just means the room started gathering evidence about you before you feel settled enough to give it good evidence. Then there's the language itself. And this is the piece I can't stop thinking about. There's a standardized stress test researchers use in the lab. They sit you in front of a stone-faced panel and make you give an impromptu talk with almost no time to prepare. While you sweat through it, they're measuring how much cortisol, the stress hormone, shows up in your saliva. The people whose cortisol climbed the highest spoke immeasurably simpler language, shorter sentences, plainer words, less of the good stuff. The harder your stress system fires, the simpler your language gets. Now, you're every bit as sharp as you were an hour ago. You've just got fewer gears within reach, and the one closest to hand is whatever you've said 1,000 times before. Well, think about it. What have we heard and said ourselves 1,000 times before? I'm excited to be here. How's everybody doing? Yawn. So you put it together. The instant you begin is the instant your body is most revved. The room is busiest judging, and your language is most likely to shrink to the nearest familiar phase. That is how a capable person ends up saying, "Good morning, everyone," like it is a life raft. I think about all of this as a doorway. There's everything you do before the doorway. The research, the writing, the slides, the practice, the feedback, moving slide 11 to slide 4, and then moving it back because you liked it better the first time. Then you reach the doorway. On the other side is the room. The second you cross that threshold, the job changes. You are done building the talk. You're now delivering it. The first words you carry through that door land at the exact moment your own system is still catching up to the room, which gives us the one line the rest of this hangs on. The opening begins before the first word. That leaves us 3 things to practice. All 3 are in the field guide, step by step. If you want to run them before your next talk, you're going to find it in the description. Tool number 1, find the live wire. Almost every talk has one. The moment something turns, a decision gets made, somebody says no, the product fails, the customer walks, the investor laughs. Does that sound familiar? The result blindsides everybody. There's live current in that moment, and current is what makes a person lean in and want to know what happens next. Here's when you reach for it. You've got good material and the opening still feels flat. When we build a talk, we almost always build it in that order. Here's the background. Here's how we started. Here's our process. Here's what happened. By the time we hit the interesting part, 12 minutes are gone. Find the live wire first. Ask yourself one question. Where in this talk would I lean forward if someone else were telling it to me? That's where you start. For the CEO, the live wire was obvious. An investor laughed at the idea. We already know the ending because he's standing on a stage celebrating the company he built. That cracks open a loop. What did the investor miss? What did he see? What happened between the laugh and the stage? We want the answers. The line writes itself. An investor laughed at me when I told him what we were going to build. This is the one that ties straight back to sweating bullets. More than a decade ago, I told people to open with a recent, relevant story. That's another carryover from my news writing days. It's still important, being relevant and being current. But I've sharpened that since. The magic word was never recent. It's relevant. A story doesn't earn the front because it happened yesterday. A story from 10 years ago is alive the second the room sees why it matters right now. We're not chasing novelty, we're chasing relevance with tension. Find the live wire. Tool number 2, know the first line cold. Now, this might sound strange coming from the guy who did a whole episode on how over-rehearsing can make you worse. You're going to find that in episode 280, Why Rehearsal Makes Some Leaders Worse. There's no contradiction. We're not memorizing 20 minutes word for word. That's what makes people brittle. The first sentence is a different animal. The first sentence has to survive the doorway. Write it, say it out loud, hear how it actually sounds in a human mouth, and fix the words that look great on a laptop and feel ridiculous the moment you say them to a real person. Then run that one sentence enough times that you own it cold. One sentence, maybe 2. We're building a clean starting block, not a cage. Decide the first line the night before when you're calm, you're relaxed, you're thinking straight. Then the stage you, with the heart going, just picks it up and goes. Know the first line cold. Tool number 3, cross the threshold. Now, this one happens in the last few seconds before you speak. Preparation has an expiration time. At some point, the editing must stop. No more tweaking the line, no more checking slide 3, no more silently rewriting paragraph 2 while somebody's still introducing you. All of that keeps you on the wrong side of the door. Right before I speak, I want a deliberate handoff from preparing to serving. The cue can be simple and physical. Feel both feet on the floor. Look up. Find one real human being in the room. Then give yourself one instruction. Serve the room. That's the threshold. The job just changed. You are finished trying to improve the talk. We're now here to connect with people. That's the reason I don't want the opening to become a gimmick. A shocking stat can actually bore a room. A clever question can feel like a trick. A story can waste everybody's time. The format never saves you. Relevance saves you. Service saves you. And your state is what lets you see the difference once the pressure hits. So we cross the threshold. The opening begins before the first word. Find the live wire. Know the first line cold. Cross the threshold. 3 moves, 3 different parts of the same problem. The live wire gives you something worth saying. Knowing the first line keeps it in reach when your pulse is up. The threshold pulls you out of prep mode and into connection. That's a strong open, and none of it is about being clever. It's about being ready and real. I keep coming back to the CEO. He handed the room the safe opening. Here's the irony that struck with me. The bold opening was the safer one. He'd lived the investor story. He knew every beat of it. There was nothing to fake. The generic opening actually asked more of him because he had to manufacture energy from a standing start. The real story would have done that work for him. That's what I love about a strong open. It doesn't just help the audience, it rescues the speaker. Once you're inside a story you've lived, you've got somewhere to go. The room leans in and you stop performing and start serving. Those years behind the teleprompter taught me something it took me a long time to name. The first line carries weight far past its size. My knack for finding one fast came from 10,000 reps. I'm not going to pretend everyone should have to log. Preparation is how you build that same edge on purpose. Before your next big one, the keynote, the board update, the pitch, the town hall, go find the most interesting thing you've already got and bring it to the front. Write the first sentence, own it cold. Then when you reach the doorway, stop preparing and cross the threshold. So I put together the open field guide to walk you through exactly that. Finding your live wire, writing your first line, building your own threshold routine before you speak. It is free. Go grab a hold of it. It means so much if you like, subscribe, and share this episode. The field guide is waiting inside the free Presence Lab community over at daledixon.me/community. That's where we do this work together, live, with the Q&A, real feedback, and honestly, it's where I actually hang out. The link is in the description because capable people don't go dull when the microphone comes on. Sometimes they just leave the most interesting part of themselves behind. I'm Dale Dixon. I will see you next week.